The lights of the lab flickered to life as Urik stumbled in from the hall, dried blood matting his robes and collar. Shutting the door behind himself, he locked it from the inside. He then tore the blood-soaked jacket from his chest and let it fall to the floor of the lab. Staggering over to the far wall, he leaned over one of the chemical sinks, his fingers shaking as he fought to compose himself. The faucet made an echoing squeak as he turned the nozzle. The water fell smoothly into the basin, and the silvery metal reflected his image. He couldn't see himself in the reflection, only the spots of blood that marred his cheeks and neck. He couldn't feel the coldness of the water as he ran his hands beneath it, only the pulsating rhythm of his aching knuckles, the splits in his palms where his fingers had dug through. When he closed his eyes, he could only see the mess that he had left in the courtyard, a mess that someone else would have to clean. A chirp sounded nearby, and Urik's heart nearly jumped. For a moment he thought it was the beep of a police siren, sounding from outside the window to the lab, the TDA arriving in droves. Then he realized it was Tephos. It crawled down the table beside the sink, scanning him. "I thought I turned you off." He plucked the robot from its perch, meeting his eyes. Then he turned it around, ready to press the manual off switch, but he could feel it reeling in his grip. Relenting, Urik sighed and set it down again. As every part of him began to ache, he realized that he could use the distraction. He stood, walking past the robot as it followed swiftly along. He set himself down on his desk, taking his papers, and made a spot for Tephos. When the spider had settled in, he gave a light smile, took up his pen, and wrote schematics for the rest of the night. Hours passed as Urik worked well into the morning. He was at his computer, typing relentlessly into one of the terminals, when one of the doors to the lab opened. He jolted his head up to see Kalani entering, and turned his eyes to the time. She was an hour earlier than he expected. Moving swiftly, he removed a window that showed a set of schematics and another with machine code written directly into the terminal. He clicked out of a few more windows hastily as Kalani rushed over to him, hitting his shoulder. "Morning, Urik. I've got great news." She stopped, catching a glimpse of the display that he was trying to hide. "What is that?" "Nothing," Urik said quickly, his eyes fixated in front of him. "Just exploring some new integration points with K0's interface." Kalani hesitated, glancing sidelong at the monitor. "Well, I received a letter this morning. Prism will be featured in an upcoming issue of the CSC magazine, and I've been nominated for the Scientific Appraisal Award." "You're kidding. That's incredible, Kalani," Urik said. She had been studying for months with Emma Rayner, one of the senior members of the Chemical Research Lab, crafting the latest iteration of their chemical adhesive. Submitting the article to the CSC magazine on their findings was a long shot. Most likely it had been done before, or their methods were outdated. But Kalani's hard work paid off, culminating in a highly reactive concoction that they called photoresponsive ionized substrate material, or PRISM. She was going to say something more, but paused when she saw Urik's face. "Are you okay?" He recoiled as she approached. A gash had congealed on his brow, and a bruise marred his cheek. Realizing he had not seen himself since his fight with Terry, he started to rise from his seat. "What happened to you?" Kalani asked, stopping him. "It's not important," Urik urged. "You worked hard on this. We should celebrate. Don't try to change the subject, Urik. Wait here." Kalani disappeared into one of the back rooms, and returned moments later with a medical supply kit. Sitting beside him, she soaked a cloth in alcohol before gently dabbing it on his injuries, causing him to wince. "Did you get in another fight?" She became focused on applying the alcohol. "No, you shouldn't worry," Urik said. Kalani tilted her head as she studied him. "This is the third fight you've been in this semester. Why shouldn't I be worried?" "They were attacking Chamberlain and his sister," Urik sighed. "I had to do something." Kalani stopped. "Who was attacking them?" "I don't know. There was a group of them," Urik said, holding his aching hip. It had taken a brutal beating from one of the students in the hustle, and after a night of working without moving, he was starting to feel it. A flash of Terry's face appeared in his eyes again, but he remained quiet. After Kalani finished cleaning and applying the bandage to Urik's lip, she gazed at it a bit longer, assessing her work. Urik watched her quietly before her eyes flicked to his. "All finished," she said with a gentle smile. "Thanks." Urik lowered his eyes as the skin on his neck became brittle. When Kalani didn't move away from him, he could feel the prickles against his face as it became hot. A private fear welling up from within, his eyes met hers. "What is it?" "Are you going to tell me what that was, on your monitor?" Urik paused, unsure of how to respond. He was about to say something when the door opened and Chamberlain entered. "Sorry I'm late," Chamberlain said sarcastically. He set his bag down on the table. "Are you both sleeping here now, or what?" As Urik gave a brief glance to Kalani, a tender tension lit between them. She smiled and lowered her head, a light strand of her hair falling, and she stood up from the seat in front of him. Urik watched as she moved away, collecting her belongings and setting them down on the desk of her workstation. Eager to avoid talking more about Terry, he looked away as if to appear busy at his computer. Chamberlain stole a rogue glance as he emptied his pack, an unspoken hesitation lingering in the empty air. "Is your sister all right, Chamberlain?" Kelani said, gazing between them. He paused, a book hanging midway out of his open satchel, and turned a quiet eye towards their team captain. Urik could feel his questioning stare. Fighting the urge to look over, he dropped his attention to the keyboard on his desk, his fingers playing against the keys without typing. "She made it home fine," Chamberlain said, shaking his head. "Just a few scrapes and bruises." Kelani saw the look in Chamberlain's eyes and ventured one question further. "Are you okay?" He took a deep breath and continued rummaging through his satchel. "Well, I never got a chance to thank Urik," he glanced up again, "for what you did back there. You really didn't have to." His eyes burning, Urik turned, meeting his friend's gaze. The two locked eyes for a moment before Chamberlain looked away, pulling out the final notebook. He turned to Kelani with a gentle huff. "My sister got into a fight with a couple other girls in her class, but the guy who attacked me was her older brother, Terry Merlin." Kelani stopped, her eyes jolting over. "Wait, this is serious." She looked between the two of them as they continued about their stations quietly. Chamberlain took a seat, arranging his papers. Urik moved his fingers across his keyboard, still playing on the keys. It was as if the gravity of the situation was lost on the both of them. "You do understand that Terry Merlin is an EV, right?" Kelani insisted. "What is an EV?" Urik said, letting his fingers fall quiet. She gave him a look. "You've been here 2 years, Urik. You should learn these things. An EV is an elected valedictorian, one of the upperclassmen who serve the school board. Emma is one of its head representatives. Yeah, not the kind of people you want to pick a fight with if you value staying at Valley Peterson. And sadly, that's not the worst part," Chamberlain said, sliding over one of his notebooks. "What do you mean? How could it possibly be any worse, Chamberlain?" Kelani replied. Urik cast a worried gaze to her. He could hear the resolve in her words weakening, her voice shaking. Chamberlain gave an exasperated sigh. "It's not good, Kelani. Terry was admitted to the hospital this morning. I heard that he's stable, but it will be a while before he recovers from his injuries. They're pretty bad." She stared at him for a while, before looking back at their new team captain, her expression a complicated one, teetering on the edge between concern, shock, and outright fear. She started to speak, but something caught, and she had to swallow the lump in her throat. "Urik, if you assaulted an EV, it's grounds for expulsion," Kelani said, closing her eyes. As Urik glanced over, she didn't dare to open them, or to meet his gaze. Instead, she continued, finding the nerves in her voice. "But if you also sent him to the hospital, then—" "Kelani," Urik interrupted finally. She opened her eyes again, but she didn't look at him. Instead, her gaze fell to the ground in front of her. Urik exhaled. "I can talk to Rector Nuvia. If I explain the situation, then I'm sure she'll understand. She can help." Chamberlain spoke then. "Urik, I'm grateful for what you did, but I wish that you hadn't. I mean, it won't just be the school board coming after you. If Terry presses criminal charges, it will also be the city. I don't think Rector Nuvia can protect you forever." An eerie silence fell over the room. The two sat for a while, looking away from each other. The previous tension turned to a desperate sadness as it felt that their team had begun to unravel at its very seams. Kelani broke the stillness with a gentle breath. "I still can't believe this. I mean, what Urik did was horrible." Their eyes met from across the room, and with a conciliatory expression, her gaze dropped again. "But it doesn't make sense that an EV would assault another student at Valley Peterson, under any circumstances. It's unheard of." "It's not that surprising," Chamberlain said, gazing between the two of them. "Haven't you noticed? Something weird is going on within the institution. It's in the air, like everyone's on edge." "But that's normal," Kelani replied, shaking her head. "The stakes have always been high at Valley Peterson, but nothing like this has ever happened. Sure, there's been more tension than normal lately, but I can't imagine that an EV would—" "I'm not coming down on the EVs," Chamberlain interrupted. "All I'm saying is that behavior has been odd at the school, from everyone. When I spoke to Kim last night, you know what she told me? She was assaulted by her lab partner, over a simple assignment. Kim has barely been here a single semester. Sure, she can be annoying, but she's not that annoying. and then factor in Terry's reaction, it was just odd. A moment passed until Urik broke the quiet with a breath, rising from his seat. Well, whatever is going on, it's not important. At least for now, I'm still the team captain, and I wanted to take us in a new direction for Tephos. Urik spun his chair away from the monitors and went over to the table near the chemical wash. Leaning forward, he placed one of his notebooks along the table, fitting it along an optical plate. He took one of the virtual scanners and shined it over the open pages before turning off the lights and closing the curtains. The room was totally dark. After a moment, an image sprang up on the holographic telemetry dish above their heads. It contained a three-dimensional rendering of the designs that Urik had drawn the previous night, and as he flipped through the pages, the picture became more complete. Behold Tephos version 5, Urik declared, staring up at the display. The images began by showing a technical layering of the components of Tephos, with marked differences to the various parts of the design. The first layer showed the intricate interlocking of the joints and the flexibility of the limbs. The second showed more of the circuitry of the design, featuring an internal transceiver device to replace the optical sensors, allowing it to both send and receive signals. The outermost stage showcased a reduction in the casing, with different mixtures of metals to allow for a lighter material. The new size of Tephos could fit even better into the palm of the hand. Urik turned another page, and the same design was copied into a legion. Smaller versions could be seen communicating with each other, scattered throughout a construction site, operating in droves. Want to create a hive mind? Chamberlain said, looking up at the images. Urik shifted, taking a measured breath, as if to mask his excitement. Using K0, we can engineer a network, adapting a hive mind of Tephos to an entire construction site. They can act as a single autonomous unit, capable of supporting platforms, creating scaffolding, and performing asynchronously on large jobs. If they're mass-produced, an architecture audit could go from spanning months to just hours. The changes aren't actually that complicated, Kelani said, her eyes scanning the image. She noticed something that struck her as odd, and as she studied the holographic blueprints, she recognized what the new design would require. But I thought we were going to move away from formulating a new alloy, Urik. He replied with a tempered haste, nearly interrupting her. Urian didn't want to go with it because he felt that the metal would be too dense. Now that we have K0, it's more feasible to incorporate everything into the new design. I think we could do it, Chamberlain said, scratching his chin. He already began to ponder the math required for the enhancements, compelled by a new drive to prove himself useful to the team. Chamberlain's eyes moved to Urik from across the room, as their new leader cycled through the remaining pages on the display. Chamberlain ventured, "Have you spoken to Urian about this?" The presentation finished, and Urik flipped the switch on the lights, a holographic image vanishing from above them. He turned halfway to Chamberlain, his mind elsewhere as he thumbed through another journal, searching through his latest sketches. "We don't have time to be indecisive. Whatever we decide, we need to present a well-engineered design to the Central Science Committee. Urian and Dale will just have to accept it." "Actually, I saw Urian in the halls this morning," Kelani said. "He was talking to one of the leads on Team Silver. It looks like he might be leaving Team Orion and taking Dale with him." Chamberlain glanced at Urik, curious about how he felt about that. Urik was already down at the table again, writing more notes. After a moment, he gazed up at the both of them. Mildly distracted, he said, "There was one more thing I wanted to show you." But before he could continue, his phone lit up, vibrating against the table. "Are you going to get that?" Chamberlain asked. When he didn't respond, Kelani exhaled softly and walked over to pick it up. "It's your brother, Urik. He says your father just heard about what happened." He groaned and slammed his notebook shut, laying his head down on the cover. "I was hoping for at least one more day." "Don't worry. Both Kim and I were there. If you need us to, we can back you up to the school council." Urik stood and started packing his things. "And who will back me up against I and Vior?" "It's okay, Urik," Kelani said lowly. "You were protecting a friend. I'm sure that will count for something." "Yeah," Chamberlain agreed. "I'm sure you'll be back here leading Project Tephos in no time." Urik stood for a moment, looking between the two of them, before exhaling. "See you later. I should get home." "Don't you have classes?" Chamberlain said. Urik paused and glanced out of the window that led to an expansive field. The yard outside reached further out into the lake between the school and the great city of Timberden. The bridge between them bustled with transports and cars on the side. As he watched, a feeling scratched at him from somewhere deep within. A desperate urge, a bit at freedom. Under his breath, Urik sighed. Not anymore. Urik left Valley Peterson on a timbered and high-speed transport called the Magnasail, a bus bridging the city and the institution. He leered out into the river, the light of the rising sun shimmering, reflecting the water's surface. For the first time in ages, he felt a tug threatening to drag him under, his vision fading under the weight of his exhaustion. As the darkness overtook him, he thought of Kaleni. The image of her filled his mind. The warmth that wrapped his body mirrored the image of her unassuming smile. Her lips sparkled in the light of the lab, her eyes gentle and gleaming, and he felt the urge to look away. It was that feeling that he hated, the thing that drew him away from her, that prevented him from showing what he desperately wanted her to see. But in that moment, that urge in the pit of his chest, the feeling that flowed up from his core, he missed it. His dream world vivid, he was compelled by the sight of her as she gazed at him, and for the first time, he smiled back. He fought to hold that forbidden expression, the tightening of his lips that betrayed something deeper. But the sight of her staring back at him was off, somehow wrong. He caught it in the flicker of her soft features, a crack giving way to doubt, that feeling soft and fading. As her smile melted into malice, the fear in Urik's chest grew, his resolve buckling beneath an unseen pressure. Kaleni stood, her eyes changing, a once gentle gaze now a piercing glare. As the warmth that once radiated fell cold, Kaleni turned away from him, revealing a horrid sight. Behind her, the bloodied body of Terry lay festering on the tiled floor, its blood pooling and one eye staring. She began to scream. "Now disembarking," the intercom sang. Urik opened his eyes. The other students stood up around him, shuffling along down the central walkway. Turning his eye to the window, he saw that he was in Temerden, the self-proclaimed greatest city on Yllisius. Urik pulled himself from his seat to follow the other passengers out of the car. The terminal was similar to the port on Valley Peterson, more torn and abused, surrounded by citizens rather than students. A few blocks from the docking station, there was a central bus port that would take him the rest of the way home. As Urik exited the open entryway, making his way towards the station, he stood before a street bustling with cars and other transports. He glanced just in time to see a group of students from Valley Peterson, a couple of them talking as they approached. "Did you hear about the EV?" one of the girls said. The trio passed Urik and stopped just ahead of him, near the pedestrian light post. Discreetly, Urik pulled his hood over his head. "Yeah, same. Last I heard, he's in the hospital. Guess there was an attack? Can't imagine a student assaulting an EV. Do they know what happened?" the taller boy said. Another student, a girl with black curls framing her face, inhaled softly, clutching her books close to her chest. Her voice a mix of disbelief and sullen resolve. She said, "He was found in the courtyard, barely recognizable. There's no way that a student from Valley Peterson was responsible." "And what do you know about it, Imran?" the first girl turned in irritation. "What? I know stuff. My family has ears all over," Imran said. Her head tilted as she watched the cars pass by along the road. Urik squinted, the hint of something in her voice or in her eyes giving him pause. From the side of her, he could see a slight, knowing grin spread across her lips. "Are you saying that someone from outside managed to get access to the institution without detection? That doesn't seem possible, Imran. You may want to check your sources," the male student said. The three stood for a while, Imran unresponsive, until the first girl turned to her in worry. "Okay, Imran, I believe you. Do your sources know if Terry will be okay?" There was silence between them as a few of the remaining cars passed by, the signal about to turn. "Imran," the boy said with a testy tone. She exhaled. "Look, if I tell you, you can't spill to anyone else, understood? No one is supposed to know this, and it could get some people into a lot of trouble." "Fine," the two others said in unison. Imran dropped her head. "Based on what I heard, it's unlikely that Merlin will recover." "Imran, what do you mean?" the girl said, her voice trembling. A light rain began to fall on them as the group continued. "I mean that whoever did this, their life will be over. Harry Merlin had a pre-existing condition that created a medical complication with his injuries. His extended family were called before the break of dawn, and in all likelihood, he passed away in his bed this morning. The TDA are already looking into it, and an investigation is underway. I don't think... As Urik listened, his mind went blank. The girl's words faded away, replaced with a ringing in his ears as if he was back in the courtyard of Valley Peterson. He closed his eyes as if imagining it, his body beginning to sway. As the world around him began to spin, he felt that he was still in the grass, still being pummeled by one of Terry's friends. He felt like he had only dreamed of what came after, and his heart ached for that to be true. He stood for a while until the light turned green, and the trio started moving across the walkway. The girl with black hair stopped, glancing backwards as the two others cleared the street. She noticed Urik standing there. Curious, she took a small step toward him. "The signal says walk," she said, her voice fighting against the growing patter of rain. As Urik came to life again, her voice was his first sensation, followed by the downpour. It pelted his jacket with heavy thuds and splashed against the concrete beneath his shoes. With a vague awareness, he could see that it was picking up, but his mind was empty of any real words, and his eyes were blank as he gazed towards the other student. Shielding herself from the shower above, she regarded him with an odd expression. Their gazes locked as cars began to pass across the road. "Imran, come on!" The girl from the group waved for her. Imran turned back, hurrying across the street before she was too late. She joined her friends and started walking, stealing one last glance at Urik, who stood there, unmoving. The three of them continued to walk, disappearing into the crowd. Dazed, Urik didn't cross the street. He started on a different path, a longer journey to the station, avoiding the main road. He kept near the buildings, turning corners until the people were scarce, but it didn't matter. He couldn't see or hear them, and they didn't pay him much mind. His gait was aimless, veering in the general direction of where he needed to go, but the life of the city rang against deaf ears. As he walked, he couldn't stop picturing Terry, the bloody pulp he had created, that one eye staring. In the back of his mind, a word was forged like a weapon. Murderer. Had he really killed Terry Merwin? After 15 minutes, he arrived and stood near the terminal leading to the Roslyn District. He stopped beside a pillar to wait for the bus, his eyes moving along the terrace, scanning the other citizens idling by. As he wondered what their lives were like, imagining their friends and families, awaiting them at their destinations, he felt a vibration against the side of his leg. It was Calden calling, again. Calden never called. Urik silenced the phone and ventured another look up at the sign above the busport entryway. It read Roslyn District, and the dock at the opposite end read Antillia District. The former was where his family lived, a rich region sitting on an incline just outside the great city. He could see the city lights from his bedroom window at night, a majestic inner place shimmering across a vast swath of land. A sparkling view of shaded pillars stretched, the prominent figure of the grand central spire enticing him. The Antillia District was the direct opposite, a run-down region, further away from the great city. It was less regulated than the other districts, and didn't benefit from the technological improvements of Temerden, often relying on outdated tech and security. It didn't have a citizen registry, so it was difficult to track anyone entering or exiting the district, and there was little regulation on import goods. It was abandoned and overrun by gangsters looking to sell drugs, weapons, or technology, and most serious business owners had turned their attention to regions closer to Temerden. As Urik read the sign, he again saw flashes of Terry. A splatter of red overtook his vision, and he shook his head as if to push it away, but the smug boy's smile beneath all the blood still followed him. It was like he died on purpose. Now, Urik would be a criminal, a murderer, like everyone had already known. As that sickness congealed in the pit of his stomach, he realized that the Roslyn District no longer felt like home. He wondered if it ever had. The bus to the Antillia District pulled in as if flying on air. Compared to the other buses, there weren't many citizens embarking. It was meant for a special few. The orange, industrial hue from within was for the security guards, the public workers, or the government officials who had jobs there. But as he stared, doors threatening to close, there was a pull to that orange light, like a moth being drawn to a flame. "Last to embark to Antillia," a soft, melodic voice came. Urik's phone buzzed again, right in his hands. He gazed down at it once more, Calden's name appearing on the display. and he grew angry. Calden never called, not as his brother. Now, he would only be calling for one reason: that bloody pulp, that staring eye. He nearly retched. He didn't answer the phone. Instead, he turned and heaved it across the overhang of the station, clearing the trees out of sight. Then, leaving the Roslyn District transport behind, he stepped onto the bus with the orange hue and took his seat. Getting comfortable for a long ride, he watched from the window as it pulled out of the station. They sailed towards the edge of the city.